Hello everyone. Today I will be returning with version 2 of the Royal Navy Tier 10 destroyer, the Daring. The matchmaking in this match is, if I think it was entirely Tier 10, actually there's two Tier 9s, but ultimately pretty much exclusively Tier 10 ships, so it should be pretty indicative of what kind of opposition you might face. The concealment on the ship is of course 5.7, which is exceptionally good for a gunboat type ship, which the Daring absolutely is. First thing I do is push into a cap and try to of course secure it. It is a bit risky because I don't really know where the radars are, especially since the Daring still suffers from one of the greatest weaknesses. I'm showing off the 360-degree turrets there. As you can see, the back turret can actually turn through the ship now. That's one of the changes made to this version 2 of this ship, is that all three turrets are 360 degrees, meaning they can turn full circles around the ship, so you always have your turrets aimed the way you should, regardless of your ship angling. I enter the cap, I already turn away, I'm ready to disengage in case something nasty pops up, like in this case a radar pops up and I start accelerating and trying to disengage. Not entirely sure what it is. AP coming in, it looks like it's a radar Minotaur. And there's a Haruguma here as well. And the Haruguma actually does a lot more damage than the Minotaur does, because of course Haruguma DPM is quite disgusting. Here we see one of the big issues, of course, with this ship. If you get radared, it's very slow to get out because, well, they have buffed the acceleration on the ship. That's one of the other changes for this version 2, is that they buffed the acceleration of these Royal Navy destroyers. The problem is, of course, that you still don't have a speed boost to enhance it further, and you're overall a pretty slow destroyer. So it makes it quite awkward to disengage, and in terms of vulnerability, I would say the Daring is one of the more vulnerable cruisers to incoming radars. I do pop Hydro as I'm going back into the cap. That's the Daring does have Hydro. It's quite short range, 3.9 kilometer ship spotting and something like almost 3 kilometer torpedo spotting. And the Haruguma actually pushes in. My Hydra spots the torps, I slow down on smoke of course, and you actually do really good DPM against ships like the Haruguma. And what this Haruguma is doing is something, of course, I often say you should never do. I will be making a Haruguma commentary later, but what this guy is doing right now is something you shouldn't do in a Haruguma, and that's try to push caps. Contested defended caps. Especially just smoking up and trying to duck or whatever, it just doesn't work. I saw he damaged my fire, because my fire is no longer ticking on him. Or actually, I'm pretty sure he's damage conned at this point. Sorry, not a fire, because I broke his engine, so I assume he was damage conned. So I'm just going to be shooting into the smoke, and the Haruguma, of course, is such a massive ship that eventually I will get follow-up hits, and we get 9 hits. I break some stuff, I start a fire, and then we have of course the follow-up torpedoes. Once again, the Haruguma is a huge, massive ship's cruiser size. If it parks in a smoke like that, it will also eat torpedoes. So I got a fire and I got a flooding on this guy who's used his damage con, and that's the end of the Haruguma. Now, that wasn't anything particularly special. That wasn't something that, for example, a Gearing couldn't have done as well. But of course, the Daring DPM is very good. In fact, if we look at the DPM values, the Daring does have 244,000 HE DPM and 302,000 AP DPM, compared to Gearing's 216, 200 and 252. It sounds very impressive. In fact, if we look at the Haruguma sits at 240 and 340, so you actually have higher HE DPM than the Haruguma. But not really. That's the problem with just blindly reading stats. Oh my god, it's got better HE DPM than the Haruguma. What a monster! But that's not how it works, because the Haruguma of course has the amazing HE pen, and with IFHE you get that 32mm pen, which means that the Haruguma in effect deals damage to everything. The Daring, on the other hand, has 140mm guns, which, while they are larger than the Akizukis, they have significantly worse pen. The HE pen can't even break 19mm, so if you want to shoot other destroyers, you have to use AP unless you spec IFHE, because the 19mm plating on other DDs will literally shatter your HE. So you have to slot IFHE on the ship, and then you buff your penetration up to 24.7, so essentially you're penning 24, which means you don't even get past the 25mm threshold. So in actuality, your HE doesn't really pen much. It pens DDs and superstructures. That's pretty much the end of it. You're not penning any, not even tier 8, even tier 8 cruisers can shatter your HE. So while it technically has higher HE DPM than the Haruguma, in actuality, no, not at all. not even close. Not even close. So the times when this high DPM actually shines is of course when you are knife fighting other destroyers or just shooting other destroyers, as you saw in that fight earlier. And that's of course, that's kind of the daring's thing. That's what it is really good at. It combines many of these things together. We have the new 360-degree turrets. We have this really high DPM against other destroyers, HE and AP DPM really high, and we got the hydroacoustic surge, and then we have another new thing that's been added, and that's these smokes. I will be showing them more later in the commentary, but I'll mention them now. And they have changed the smokes to more of a Pan-Asian style short smoke kind of mechanic. Basically, your smokes, the premium smokes that I of course recommend, you can buy them with credits, but they're still premium because they are basically the elite consumable. The smokes last for 40 seconds and they have a 60-second cooldown. So there's a technical downtime of 20 seconds, but if you slot the flag, that reduces it by 5%, and you use Captain Jack Dunkirk, which is of course extremely good on the daring because he has the 10% improved jack of all trades. You can actually cut this smoke down quite a bit to almost 50 seconds, which means you only have a 10-second downtime between smokes, which gives you a lot of flexibility. Another change they made is something that I and the community overall requested, and that's of course changing the torpedoes from being single and widespread to single and narrow spread. And you saw the double narrow spread there caught the Minotaur with 2 torpedoes, and it looks like a third one is about to catch the Yamato as well. This was of course extremely annoying because before you could launch narrow spreads, you had to do that stupid thing where you launch every 10 torpedoes one at a time in order to create your own narrow spreads. Single launch torpedoes are of course still very useful, but being able to just quickly launch narrow spreads is extremely valuable, especially when a Minotaur is rushing you like he was doing there, and you simply don't have time to individually spread out every single torpedo. So that's a very welcome change. In fact, in general, most of the changes that the ship has gotten are buffs and very welcome ones. The short duration smoke kind of synergizes quite well with the build. It like when I land a torp, I smoke up, I ducka, and you see my smoke is already fading. That's how quickly the smoke fades. And it's already gone. I get detected, but he should be dead. There we go, and he's dead. So the new smokes kind of help you. You go pick a fight, you smoke up, you ducka, you disengage, you go back, you pick another fight when the enemy DD smoke is on cooldown. It all kind of helps in this knife fighting thing that a well-played daring is probably going to be extremely frustrating to deal with as this kind of knife fighter, because it has a lot of things that just really work for it. You never really have your guns pointed the wrong way because they're 360-degree turrets with a fast turret traverse. You're unlikely to ever eat torpedoes because of the hydro. You're unlikely to ever get caught without a smoke because of the fast reloading smoke. You have higher health. I mean, the gearing sits at 19.4k health. You sit at 20.8. That's 1.4k more health than the gearing. And of course, if you add survivability expert, then you're sitting at 24.3 as I do in this commentary. So it's very specialized at being really good at wrecking other destroyers. That's absolutely its thing. Would I believe in a straight up fight against something like a Haruguma? The Haruguma will probably wreck it. I mean, yeah, I'm pretty sure Haruguma will wreck it simply because they are pretty close on DPM, so it might not be as straightforward. A Kaba, of course, will win a fight at range, but that's what Kaba does. Kaba wins long-range fights quite easily against pretty much all destroyers, including Haruguma, as long as you maintain a healthy range. But close range, once again, I don't see any issues the daring will have picking a fight with the Kaba at close range. So it's very much a counter destroyer. The AA, not really worth discussing. I mean, you don't have defensive AA, so ultimately it doesn't matter. I was hoping this guy would let me get past so I could reverse and torp the Musashi that's hiding behind the island, but that guy did not want to let me pass. So it looks like we're going the other way instead. I guess he was tunnel vision down his aim, or down his zoom, and wasn't really paying attention. Anyway, the AA is not really worth talking about. I mean, the AA's, the values are decent, but you don't have defensive AA, so really if any good carrier wants to kill you, he is going to kill you. There's really not much else to it. I mean, carriers automatically counter all destroyers. That's just their thing. I don't really like it, but they automatically hard counter all destroyers in the game. But because of no defensive AA, they counter you especially hard, once again, because you're so slow as well. So all the torpedo drops, for example, the torps are significantly faster than you are, since torps usually do about 40 knots, and whereas other DDs can break 40 knots, you struggle quite a bit to do that, since your max speed is 37.8 with the flag. The rudder shift is, well, the turning circle is quite good. I think it was 630 meters. I think gearing has 640, so very similar to gearing handling in that sense. But they did, of course, change it so that you now have that faster acceleration. But that also means that you can no longer slot the acceleration module, because, well, I guess Wargaming thought that with the buffed acceleration, if you slotted the acceleration module, you just end up with too much acceleration, so that you literally cannot even use it. So of course the other default choice becomes running the rudder shift module, which takes down your rudder shift to 3.7. Not quite as fast as gearings, but once again the ship handles very well, and it's not really that big of a deal. Ultimately though, it's a solid tier 10. One thing I should mention is they nerfed the range. They nerfed the range in return, because one of the things I of course highlighted in my previous daring commentary was the fire chance. I did mention that it kind of loses in effective DPM to both gearing and Harugoma quite often, simply because, well, you have to have IFHE. With IFHE, it does beat gearing. Don't get me wrong. If you're running IFHE, you will outgun the gearing. But then again, the gearing is using his 4 points on something else like RPF, so it's not such a black and white trade. No, the one thing the daring has going for it is the fire chance. It's got an 8% fire chance compared to gearing's and Haruguma's 5% fire chance. So if you do get the opportunity to Dakka, you actually have a very high chance of setting fires, because add in demo expert and potentially flags, and you're sitting at 11% fire chance, which is almost cruiser fire chance, except of course your guns reload exceptionally fast because they're destroyer guns and you're a gunboat and so forth. So your fire starting capacity is very high and quite consistent, in fact. So that's kind of your offset to Haruguma's superior actual DPM and the fact that the gearing doesn't really need IFHE to deal damage. Here we get to see these smokes, of course. I smoke up Dakka. He disengages, turns away, and honestly, by the time he's disengaged and gotten away, my smoke has almost already faded. He gives broadside, we switch to AP. The AP is quite good, as you can see. Some good chunks of damage, and my smoke fades, and I'm disengaging. And this kind of, now I know the Kaba is also pushing me because the smoke faded, and my new smoke is already ready. So this allows for a lot of like very strong counter gameplay against other DDs, because you're never really caught with your pants down. You got your hydros, your fast smokes, your guns, everything. It's very flexible, very versatile destroyer against other destroyers, and I mean it's quite good at burning down battleships as well. But the radar weakness cannot, of course, be. Radar and carrier weakness is extreme, but I quite like it. Oh, what I was mentioning, I'm sorry, I completely lost track of thought there. Because of this high fire chance, of course, one of the things I tended to do quite often in the daring previously was smoke up and just burn to death a bunch of battleships, which of course, apparently Wargaming didn't like that, so they nerfed the range from 13.8 to 12.8. So a 1 kilometer range nerf. They did make it so that you can slot the range mod on the destroyer instead, so you can regain all that lost range if you and some extra if you wanted to, but ultimately I prefer the pure Dakka, as I prefer the pure gun power of the ship. Rushing the Kaba pops up. I can switch to AP since he's giving broadside, but I don't think there's any need. the HE quite quickly melts the Kava. AP might have melted him even a bit quicker there, but then again I wasn't sure if he was going to turn broadside or not. And once again I have another smoke ready because I'm spotted by the plane and I can disengage again. So once again, for enemy destroyers, what a frustrating opponent. Very, very frustrating opponent. And it's just very strong at what it does. I don't know how hyped I am for this ship though. I mean, I feel like it does remind me a fair bit about of the Yu Yang, just like Smoke Yu Yang, with the fast reloading Pan-Asian smokes. And I thought, I was under the impression that Wargaming didn't like. You can see the difference here, by the way, how Zhao's armor just shatters all my shells. Haruguma here would be probably killing him almost, whereas, well, we're getting majority shatters. 21 shatters, 15 pence. Oh, 24 shatters, 16 pence. So the lack of penetration is obvious and shows that the effective DPM is nowhere near as high as the values. What I was saying though, I thought Wargaming didn't like these fast reloading smokes, and that's why they kind of nerfed the Pan-Asian smokes. It's kind of weird to see them do that and then add these Royal Navy smokes, which are like an even more extreme version of this. That's not to say the smokes are automatically amazing. Having really short duration, quick reloading smokes can be an advantage in many situations, but they've also gotten me killed. I rushed in and torped the ship, and then I had to smoke up to fight his teammates, and because the smoke was so short, by the time the smoke faded I didn't have time to like kill them, and I just got spotted and killed off right after. So having these short duration smokes is not always going to be an advantage. They're quite often an advantage, but if you get caught in a situation that, for example, an enemy battleship just pushes straight towards your smoke, which is a very viable option if he manages to dodge your torps, because once people learn that these smokes are very short duration, just sailing, you see a daring pop up and you sail towards him, he starts shooting you, and if his torps miss, you know that his smoke is going to fade extremely quickly. And when the smoke fades, well, the daring is caught in the open, being quite slow and quite thick, and that's going to be some battleship AP pens and probably a quite easy kill. So that smoke duration is absolutely not as straightforward of a buff as one might think. It's very, very good against other destroyers, not that good against pretty much everything else. Seeing if I can get some fires or some harassment on him. Reminder, of course, that this is a test ship, which is why I don't get any achievements. I would probably have a potential devastating strike against the Minotaur, probably Confederate high caliber, at least the Kraken, because I got 5 kills. But once again, test ships don't get achievements, so this game is going to end. The Zhao can't really do much. He was way out of position, and, well, we have all the caps. So all I really need to do is sail away and whistle a jaunty tune as I end up winning this game. So new daring, strong. Very strong. It has its set of weaknesses, mostly the speed itself, and smokes can be debated. The fact that you require IFHE is something I don't really like, though. That's something... I don't like ships that are fundamentally balanced around the fact that you have to waste 4 captain points in order to make it work. The default pen, I mean, you got 114mm guns, you divide it by 6, you get 19mm of pen. Well, actually you don't pen 19, you have 18mm of effective pen, which means that your HE literally pens nothing. You don't even pen enemy destroyers. So IFHE is absolutely 100% mandatory, and it's a bit that the ship is balanced around making this a must-have, especially since the tier 8 Royal Navy destroyer doesn't require this because it has 120mm guns, and divide that by 6, you of course get 20mm of pen, which means it can damage other DDs without any issues. So the daring is very strong. It's very specialized, but it also requires, well, you have to have a captain and you have to spec into IFHE to really make it work. A bit annoying. I mean, it doesn't make it a bad ship. I just consider it annoying when they balance ships around stuff like that. Looking at the team score, 2.8k base. We did end up, well, we killed the Haruguma at the start, and overall we did have a pretty big impact on the outcome. So I will take it. We also managed to secure 2 caps, I think, as well. Detailed report, surprisingly much torpedo damage this game. In general, you tend to get a lot more gunboat damage, honestly, than torpedo damage. It might be that this new smoke mechanic is kind of also shifting you away a bit from the sit in smoke and just farm battleships, which I think that's part of why they reduced the smoke duration and reduced the gun range, is because they really didn't like basically Daring's just sitting in a smoke and farming, especially since they literally just released the Harugumo, which is doing exactly that. So I guess they wanted to differentiate the gameplay a bit. Overall though, quite a strong ship, and honestly the ship does get my recommendation. I think it's very strong, quite fun to play. It is very similar though to the Yu Yang gearing experience. Besides the short smokes, there's not really too much to set it apart. Better DPM than gearing, much worse torpedoes, trade-offs. Trade-offs back and forth, much slower, vulnerable to carriers, hydro to defend against torp. Trade-offs back and forth. I guess, well, there comes a point in a game when you have so many different lines and so many different ships, it's hard to make them entirely unique anymore, and they all start blending together a bit. And I guess that's what we're starting to see a bit here with the Daring. It does have its unique things, but it still feels very similar to the other hybrid gunboats. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this first impressions of the version 2 of the Daring. I will talk to you guys later.